The gilded facade, the emerald silk of Alara Vance's dress felt cool and liquid beneath her palms as she smoothed it over her hips. The movement, a nervous habit she thought she'd conquered. In the mirror, the woman staring back was a vision of curated elegance, a living extension of the art she so loved. The dress was a masterpiece itself, its color a deep forest green that made her auburn hair seem richer and her skin glow. Every stitch, every fold was perfect. After weeks of anticipation, the night of the Astral Philanthropy Gala had finally arrived, and Alara was determined that everything would be flawless. "He won't know what hit him," declared her roommate, Chloe, leaning against the doorframe with a knowing smile. She swirled the wine in her glass. "Liam is going to forget how to speak when he sees you." Alara offered a faint smile, though a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. As an independent art curator trying to secure more corporate clients, tonight was more than just supporting her boyfriend of 10 months. It was her debut into the inner sanctum of the city's elite. The very circle Liam Croft moved within as a rising star at Thornfield Industries. "I just want to make a good impression," she admitted, fastening a delicate silver bracelet around her wrist. "His colleagues are a different breed." "Please," Chloe scoffed, entering the room. "You've advised collectors who could buy and sell Thornfield Industries. If anything, they should be nervous to meet you." Liam had been strangely evasive about the event, offering few details and brushing off her excited offers to help him prepare. Now, applying a final touch of rose-colored gloss to her lips, she pushed the doubts aside. Their relationship had felt strained lately, with Liam working constant late nights. His texts becoming brief and functional, their weekend plans frequently canceled. Tonight, she was sure, would change that. It would remind him of what they had. The doorbell chimed precisely at 8. Liam stood in the hallway, undeniably handsome in his custom-fit tuxedo. Yet his smile was a quick, perfunctory flash that didn't warm his eyes. "You look nice," he said, his gaze already drifting over her shoulder to check his reflection in the hall mirror. "Car's waiting. We shouldn't be late." The ride to the Crystal Phoenix Hotel passed in a near silence, punctuated only by the soft hum of the luxury sedan and Liam's occasional clipped phone calls. Alara watched the city lights blur past, mentally rehearsing introductions and discussing points about Thornfield's recent support of the Modern Art Museum. She'd done her homework, memorizing names and corporate structures. "Just a heads up," Liam said suddenly as the glowing hotel entrance came into view. "This is a big networking night for me. A lot of important faces. Don't feel like you have to stick to me like glue all evening." "Of course," Alara replied, the sting of his words expertly concealed behind a polished tone. "I understand." The nature of these events, the gala was housed in the Crystal Phoenix's grand ballroom, a space transformed into an ethereal landscape of light and crystal. Enormous, intricate chandeliers cast a diamond glow over everything, and the air smelled of night-blooming flowers and expensive perfume. A quartet played something soft and classical in a corner. Alara felt a thrill cut through her apprehension. This was the world she wanted to influence, to bring beauty into. "Liam, there you are." A broad-shouldered man with a commanding presence clapped Liam on the back. "Stellar work on the Meridian account." The old man was impressed. "Mark, thank you. That means a lot." Liam's demeanor shifted instantly, becoming animated and warm. He turned slightly. "Mark, this is my girlfriend Alara?" "A pleasure," Mark said, shaking her hand with a firm, brief grip. His eyes were already scanning the crowd behind her. "Alara is in the arts," Liam added, his tone suggesting it was a charming, if slightly trivial, hobby. "How lovely." Mark replied, not unkindly, but with zero interest. He was already steering Liam away. "Need to grab Harrison before he gets cornered by logistics." As the evening wore on, Alara found herself adrift in a sea of black ties and glittering gowns. She clucked a flute of champagne she didn't really want, smiling politely at passing guests, attempting conversations that died almost as soon as they were born. She watched Liam work the room with an easy, confident charm she rarely saw in. Private, and a hollow feeling began to grow in her chest. Despite her meticulous preparation, she felt like a beautiful, forgotten ornament. Then she saw it. The crowd near the dance floor shifted, and there he was. But he wasn't with Mark or Harrison. Liam stood close to a stunning woman in a gown of liquid silver. The woman laughed at something he said, her hand resting familiarly on his forearm, her touch lingering just a moment too long. She was beautiful in a sharp, formidable way. She looked at Liam with a possessiveness that stole the air from Ilara's lungs. "Serena Volkov," a woman's voice murmured beside her. Ilara turned to see an elegant older woman with shrewd eyes, head of strategic acquisitions. "She and your boyfriend were practically engaged a few years back. I'm Margaret, by the way, from legal." Ilara's cheeks burned. She couldn't look away as Liam leaned in, whispering something that made Serena tilt her head back with a throaty laugh. He placed his hand on the small of her back, a gesture that had always felt intimate and proprietary when he did it to her, and guided her onto the dance floor. The orchestra began a new, slower piece. "If you'll excuse me," Ilara whispered to Margaret, who nodded with a look of quiet understanding. Lara positioned herself behind a decorative column, her heart hammering against her ribs. Liam and Lara. Serena moved together with a seamless, practiced synergy. They weren't just dancing. They were communicating in a silent language of subtle pressures and knowing glances. Liam was smiling, a real, unguarded smile that Ilara realized she hadn't been the recipient of in weeks. A cold wave of nausea washed over her. She had been a placeholder. When the music faded, Ilara intercepted him as he led Serena off the floor. "You seem to be enjoying yourself," she said, her voice miraculously steady. Liam's face flickered with a moment of pure panic before settling into mild annoyance. "Serena's an old friend and colleague. We're catching up on the Singapore merger. It's a huge deal." "An old fiancé, from what I hear," Ilara corrected, her gaze steady. Liam sighed, glancing around as if she were causing a scene. "That was a long time ago. This is business, Ilara. You know how this works. Everyone here has history." "You've spent the entire evening ignoring me," she said, the tremor finally breaking through. "I told you it would be a working night," he said, his irritation now plain. "Look, Serena's team and mine are merging. I need to keep that relationship solid." His phone buzzed and he glanced at it. "I have to take this. Why don't you try the canaps?" "There. Incredible." He gave her arm a dismissive pat. "I'll find you later." He was gone before she could form a retort, swallowed by the crowd. She stood alone, utterly exposed. A few nearby guests glanced her way with polite curiosity. From across the room, Serena met her eyes and offered a small, faint smile that could have been sympathy, but felt more like victory. It was unbearable. Ilara placed her champagne flute on a passing tray and moved toward the nearest exit, her vision blurring. She needed air, needed to be away from the gilded lies and the crushing weight of her own naivety. She pushed through a heavy set of doors, escaping into the cool, quiet embrace of the night. The night air was a cool, shocking balm against her heated skin. Ilara gripped the cold stone balustrade of the expansive terrace garden, her knuckles turning white as she stared unseeingly at the glittering skyline. The hum of the city was a distant, grounding rumble compared to the high-pitched buzz of humiliation still ringing in her ears. She took deep, shuddering breaths, fighting back the hot press of tears. She would not cry. She would not give him, or any of them, that satisfaction. The terrace was a masterpiece of landscape design, all sculpted hedges, fragrant night-blooming jasmine, discreetly placed lanterns that cast soft pools of light on the flagstones. It was deserted, a sanctuary for one, or so she thought. It's often the best part of these events. A calm, masculine voice observed from the shadows. "The quiet," Laura started, turning swiftly. A man emerged from behind a trellis, heavy, with climbing roses. He was tall, with an athletic build that his impeccably tailored charcoal suit did little to conceal. He wasn't conventionally handsome. His features were too strong, too defined, as if carved from granite. But his presence was immense, filling the quiet space around them with a palpable sense of authority. It was his eyes, however, that held her a penetrating shade of slate gray. They were assessing, but held no judgment, only a quiet, focused intelligence. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said, instinctively straightening her spine, slipping back into the professional composure that was her armor. "You're not," he replied, his voice a low, resonant baritone. He took a few measured steps closer, stopping a respectful distance away. Julian Thorne. The name landed not with a bang, but with a deep, resonant thud of recognition. Julian Thorne, the founder and CEO of Thornfield Industries. The man who built an empire from nothing, a legend known for his ruthless brilliance and his intense privacy. He rarely attended his own galas, preferring to remain an enigmatic specter. And yet, here he was. Elara Vance, she managed, her voice surprisingly steady. "I know," he said, and at her look of surprise, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "You curated the Unseen Dialogues exhibition at the Modern Art Museum last year. Your use of space to force conversation between conflicting artists was revolutionary." Elara could only stare. He had seen her work. He knew her name. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling inadequate. "I wasn't aware you followed the local art scene." "I follow excellence, Ms. Vance," he stated simply, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. He gestured to a stone bench nestled between two fragrant lavender bushes. "May I?" She nodded, and he sat, not too close, his posture relaxed, yet utterly commanding. He didn't fill the silence with empty platitudes. He simply shared it with her, his gaze on the city lights rather than on her, giving her a moment to collect the shattered pieces of herself. "May I offer an observation?" he asked after a long, comfortable pause. "Please. You advise artists and galleries on presenting a cohesive, powerful narrative. You understand the profound impact of presence. Yet tonight you allowed a poorly written subplot to derail your entire story." His words were direct, but his tone was not unkind. It was analytical, respectful. A surprised, slightly wounded laugh escaped her. "A poorly written subplot. Is that what we're calling it?" "From my vantage point, yes," he said, finally turning those keen gray eyes on her. "The lead character is clearly capable of commanding the narrative. She simply forgot her own agency for a moment." He paused, letting his words settle. "In my experience, true power is never given. It's taken. And you, Ms. Vance, have all the required tools to take it." His perception was unnerving. He'd seen everything, the hurt, the humiliation, the retreat, and had reframed it not as a defeat, but as a momentary lapse in strategy. He was speaking her language, the language of narrative and presence. But with the hard-edged pragmatism of a man who built empires, knowing that and feeling it are two very different things. She admitted, surprised by her own honesty with this stranger. Indeed, he agreed. But the feeling follows the action, not the other way around. He glanced back toward the ballroom where the muffled sounds of the quartet and polite conversation seeped through the doors. "The question isn't about what was lost in there. The question is what you intend to reclaim, and what would you suggest?" she asked, genuinely curious about what this man, who seemed to operate on a different plane of existence, would propose. Julian Thorne stood, straightening his jacket with a single, efficient motion, extended his hand toward her not in pity, but with the air of a general offering an alliance to a valued equal. "Inside I have board members to placate and investors to reassure. It is a tedious dance of ego and avarice. I could use the company of someone who understands the subtle art of making a genuine impression. Would you care to accompany me?" Elara looked at his offered hand. Then her gaze drifted to the ballroom doors, behind which Liam and Serena were no doubt continuing their performance. A cold clarity washed over her. This wasn't about Liam, not anymore. It was about the woman in the emerald silk dress who had walked in with her head high, full of ambition and worth. It was about reclaiming her. She placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and sure. "Mr. Thorne," she said, rising to her full height, the emerald silk whispering around her like a suit of armor. "I would be delighted." The grand ballroom of the Crystal Phoenix was a self-contained universe of soft light and murmured diplomacy. A carefully maintained ecosystem where every gesture was a transaction and every smile a calculation. The atmosphere within this universe shifted not with a quake, but with a subtle, seismic ripple. It began at the periphery, a sudden stillness near the French doors that spread inward like a slow-moving wave, quieting conversations mid-sentence. The doors swung open not with a dramatic flourish, but with a confident, steady pressure. And there they were, Julian Thorne. A man who treated his own galas with the detached attendance of a monarch reviewing distant troops, was not making a brief, perfunctory appearance. He was entering the heart of the room, and on his arm, her spine straight and her chin held level, was the woman in emerald silk, whom most had dismissed hours ago as Liam Croft's quiet. Decorative plus -1.ELARA felt the weight of hundreds of eyes, the collective intake of breath, the silent, frantic recalibration happening in every mind in the room. Aya, once thick with perfume and pretension, now crackled with pure, undiluted curiosity. Julian's pace was unhurried, a steady, grounding presence beside her. He did not look at the crowd. His focus was forward, yet his entire demeanor communicated that the woman on his arm was exactly where she was meant to be. Julian. A familiar, booming voice cut through the silence. It was Mark, the silver-haired executive from before, his eyebrows nearly disappearing into his hairline. "Didn't expect to see you holding court?" His eyes flickered to Alara, brimming with new, intense interest. "Mark," Julian acknowledged, with a slight nod. Didn't break stride, but he paused long enough to make the introduction count. "I've been acquiring a masterclass in authentic narrative from Ms. Vance. Her perspective is a rare commodity." Turned his gaze fully on Alara. "Ms. Vance, this is Mark Wilson. He runs our Pacific Division." Mark Alara Vance is the visionary behind the Unseen Dialogues exhibition. Her work on contextual placement is what your team should study before the Tokyo launch. Mark's expression transformed from patronizing curiosity to genuine professional intrigue. Took Alara's offered hand. "The Unseen Dialogues? That was you? My wife wouldn't stop talking about it for weeks. The way you juxtaposed those contemporary pieces with the Renaissance sketches. Breathtaking." "Thank you, Mr. Wilson," Alara said, her voice clear and caring, just enough to be heard by the eavesdropping circle forming around them. The tension between eras creates a new third conversation. It's a strategy that could be powerfully applied to corporate branding, making legacy values dialogue with innovative vision. From across the room, Liam stood frozen. The champagne flute in his hand was suspended halfway to his lips, forgotten. The shock on his face was a fleeting, beautiful tableau of confusion that rapidly curdled into disbelief, then into a dawning, panicked understanding. Serena beside him had gone very still. Her sharp eyes narrowed as she processed this unforeseen variable in her evening's equation. Julian guided Alara through the crowd, a shark moving through water, and she moved with him, not as a passive accessory, but as a fellow predator. He introduced her to a formidable woman in a sapphire blue gown. "Olivia, this is Alara Vance. Olivia Chen heads our Asian markets. She's been searching for a way to make our Singapore headquarters feel less like a corporate outpost and more like a cultural bridge. Challenge I'd love to discuss," Alara said, meeting Olivia's appraising gaze without flinching. "It's about weaving local artistic vernacular into the architectural brand, not as decoration, but as integral narrative." For the next 40 minutes, Alara was immersed in a series of substantive, high-level conversations. She discussed perceptual psychology with the head of marketing, spatial awareness with an architect, and cultural symbolism with the international directors. Julian didn't hover. He facilitated, then stepped back, allowing her expertise to shine on its own merit. Each handshake, each exchanged business card. The hollow feeling in her chest was filled with a solid, glowing certainty. This was her world, too. She had just been asking for permission to enter it from the wrong person. It was Serena who broke first. She approached during a lull, her smile a perfect, polished weapon. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced," she said, her voice like honeyed steel. She extended a hand. "Serena Volkov, Strategic Acquisitions, Alara Vance." "Art curation and narrative consulting," Ella replied, her handshake firm and brief. She felt Julian shift slightly beside her, silent sentinel. "I had no idea you were so well acquainted with Mr. Thorne." Serena remarked, the implicit question hanging in the air between them. Ms. Vance's work has been on my radar for some time, Julian interjected smoothly, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Her understanding of authentic presence is unparalleled in this city. It's a strategic asset. The emphasis on authentic was a precisely thrown dart. Serena's smile tightened at the corners, a minute crack in her flawless facade. How? Fascinating, she said. Liam had mentioned you worked with art. I had no idea the scope was so corporate. The principles of compelling narrative are universal, Ms. Volkov, Alara corrected gently, her voice cool. Whether applied to a canvas, a sculpture, or a brand's identity, it's about truth, not just aesthetics. At that moment, Liam materialized at Serena's side, his expression a poorly constructed mask of casual amusement. Alada, he said, his voice overly light. There you are. I've been looking for you. I see you've been busy networking. The last word was laced with a subtle derision. Exceptionally productive, Alara replied, her composure unshakable. The hurt was still there, but it was a distant echo overshadowed by the sheer power of the moment. Mr. Thorne has been kind enough to introduce me to several potential clients. The Singapore project sounds particularly riveting. Thorne doesn't usually take such a personal interest in staff partners, Liam said, faint accusation bleeding into his tone. Perhaps he recognizes valuable insight regardless of its personal associations, Lara said, meeting his gaze directly, her own eyes cool and clear. It's a quality that separates good networkers from great leaders, something to consider. She didn't wait for his response. With a slight, polite nod to both him and a stunned Serena, she turned. Olivia was just mentioning the Singapore Cultural Council, Mr. Thorne. I'd love to hear your thoughts. She placed her hand lightly back on Julian's offered arm as they moved away. Gliding through the parted crowd, Alara didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel Liam's bewildered, frustrated gaze burning into her back. For the first time that evening, she felt truly, completely seen. Not as Liam Croft's girlfriend, but as Alara Vance. And it was everything. The morning sun that streamed into Ilara's apartment was different. It wasn't just light, it was an illuminator, catching the dust motes dancing in the air and making the polished wood floors glow. It felt like clarity. The lingering ghosts of the gala, the perfume, the hum of conversation, the sting of betrayal had been burned away by a deep, resonant sense of peace. She moved through her kitchen, preparing her coffee with a methodical calm that felt new. The events of the previous night played in her mind, not as a painful reel, but as a series of instructive scenes. The humiliation, the garden, Julian Thorne's challenging offer, her triumphant return. It was a story, and she had ultimately seized control of its narrative. Her phone buzzed on the countertop. A persistent, angry insect. Liam's name flashed on the screen again. She had stopped counting after the fifth call and the dozen increasingly. Frantic texts. The last one read, Alara, please, we need to talk. Last night was a huge misunderstanding. You're overreacting once. Those words would have hooked her. They would have sent her spiraling into a labyrinth of self-doubt, parsing each syllable for hidden meaning, for a chance to fix what was broken. Now she looked at them and felt nothing but a distant, clinical pity. She placed the phone face down on the counter without a second thought. The silence that followed was profound. The chime from her laptop was a clean, professional sound. She opened it to find an email waiting. The sender line made her breath catch, just for a second. Julian Thorne. The subject was even more startling. Consulting proposal. Singapore cultural integration. She opened it, her fingers steady. Ms. Following our discussions last evening, I've conference with Olivia Chen regarding our Southeast Asia expansion. Your insights on cultural authenticity and spatial narrative align precisely with our vision for the Singapore headquarters launch. Attached. Please find a preliminary consulting contract for your review. The scope encompasses executive team immersion, training, brand identity synthesis with local art communities, and the curation of the headquarters' inaugural exhibition. This is, as I stated, a recognition of exceptional talent. Your composure and professionalism under personal duress last night only served to confirm my initial assessment of your capabilities. The terms are open for discussion. My office is at your disposal, should you wish to negotiate. Regards, Julian Thorne. Alara read it twice, then a third time, allowing the reality of it to settle into her bones. It wasn't a favor. It wasn't a consolation prize. It was a 6-month contract with a fee that dwarfed her annual income, outlining responsibilities that were the exact manifestation of her professional dreams. It was validation, pure and simple, from a source whose opinion was unimpeachable. Her phone rang again. Chloe's name this time? Okay, spill it. Everything, Chloe demanded, her voice vibrating with excitement. Liam just called the landline. He sounded completely unhinged. What in the world happened after I lost you? Lara laughed, the sound light and free. The short version. Everything fell apart. And then I put it back together again, but better. She recounted the evening, from the crushing sight of Liam and Serena to the quiet power of Julian's conversation and the electric moment of their re-entrance. So wait. Chloe interrupted, breathless. Are you and the CEO? You know? No, Alara said, her voice firm with certainty. This isn't that. This is professional. He saw my value when the man who was supposed to care for me could only see his own reflection. There's a universe of difference. After hanging up, Alara didn't immediately reply to Julian's email. Instead, she opened a new document. The title came to her easily. Vance Consulting. A 5-year vision. For the next 2 hours, she poured herself onto the page. She outlined plans to expand from solo curation to a full-scale consultancy. Building a team of specialists, creating workshops for women in leadership, leveraging the Thornfield contract as a flagship to attract global clients. The path had always been there, a map she had drawn herself years ago. She had just allowed Liam's dismissive attitude toward her artsy career to make her fold it up and hide it away. The doorbell rang in the early afternoon. A sense of cold inevitability settled over her. She knew who it was before she even looked through the peephole. Liam stood on her welcome mat, his expression a carefully arranged portrait of contrition and confusion. His hair was slightly messy, and he'd foregone his usual crisp suit for a sweater and jeans. A calculated attempt at vulnerable sincerity. You're not answering your phone, he said, stepping forward as if to enter. Alara remained in the doorway, blocking his path, her body a silent, immovable boundary. I've been working. Look, about last night, began, his tone practiced, reasonable. Serena and I have history, yes, but it's ancient history. It's over. You completely overreacted. And that little stunt with Thorne, everyone was talking. It was unprofessional. That stunt resulted in a 6-month consulting contract with Thornfield Industries, Lara replied, her voice even devoid of heat. And it wasn't about you, Liam. It was about me remembering who I am. His face underwent a fascinating transformation. The contrition melted away, replaced in a blink by sharp, calculating interest. A contract? With Thornfield? Alara? That's incredible, he beamed. A sudden, brilliant smile that felt like a grotesque performance. We should celebrate. Listen, I can help you. I know how the executive team thinks. I can prep you for the meetings, help you navigate the politics. The sheer audacity of it, the instant copting of her achievement, was so perfectly, quintessentially Liam that Alara almost laughed. He couldn't help himself. His world was one of perpetual transaction. Liam, she said, her voice soft but final, cutting through his plans. I think last night revealed everything we needed to know about our relationship. One misunderstanding shouldn't erase 10 months together, he argued, his voice taking on a pleading edge. He reached for her hand. Leia took a deliberate step back, away from his touch. It wasn't the dance that was the problem. It was realizing I'd been accepting your definition of my worth instead of insisting on my own. She saw the genuine bafflement in his eyes and felt a pang of sadness. Not for the end, but for the time wasted. I wish you well, Liam. Truly. She didn't wait for another plea or negotiation. She closed the door softly, the click of the lock echoing with a profound sense of finality. The silence in her apartment was no longer just empty. It was full of potential. She returned to her laptop, opened Julian's email, and began to type her response. She accepted the contract, but she also proposed several adjustments. Expanding the scope to include a digital narrative strategy, her voice confident and sure. As she worked, she realized the gala had given her something far more valuable than a contract or professional connections. It had given her the courage to shatter a beautiful illusion and step onto a path of her own making. One built not on borrowed prestige, but on the solid ground of her own recognized worth. 6 weeks later, the air in the Chroma Gallery was different. It wasn't the sterile, recycled air of a corporate ballroom or the tense atmosphere of a relationship on its last breath. It was alive with the low, excited hum of genuine appreciation, the soft clink of wine glasses, and the scent of fresh polish and evening blooms. The opening for Reliquaries of the Future, an exhibition of bio-integrated sculpture, was the city's most sought-after ticket, and Alara Vance, standing at its center, was its quiet architect. She wore a dress of deep cobalt blue, a color that spoke of confidence and depth, not of desperate elegance. She moved through the crowd with an easy grace, pausing to speak with artists, collectors, and critics. Her conversations were focused, her laughter genuine. She was no longer a spectator in this world. She was a creator within it, a young sculptor. His hands, still faintly stained with clay, grasped her arm. "Ms. Vance, the way you've lit the mycelium network piece. Transformative. You completely understood the intention." "The intention was always there, Matthias," she replied, smiling. "I just helped remove the shadows." From across the room, she felt a shift in the energy, a subtle, gravitational pull. She didn't need to turn to know he had arrived. A moment later, Julian Thorne stood at the edge of the gathering, having declined a glass of champagne from a passing server. He was, as always, impeccably dressed in a dark suit that managed to be both understated and commanding. His gaze swept the room, analytical and appreciative, before it found her. He made his way toward her. Not with the impatient stride of a busy CEO, but with a measured pace that suggested there was nowhere else he'd rather be. The crowd seemed to part for him instinctively. "Ms. Vance," he said, stopping before her. His slate-gray eyes took in the exhibition, then returned to her. A triumph, managed to make the speculative feel immediate, the foreign feel intimate. "Mr. Thorne," she inclined her head, a warm, professional smile on her lips. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure these events were your preferred habitat." "I make exceptions for excellence," he stated, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "and for those who follow through on their potential." The unspoken reference to their night at the gala hung between them, a shared, pivotal history. They fell into an easy discussion about the pieces. His questions sharp and insightful, her explanations passionate and clear. It was a dance of intellect and respect, a world away from the hollow networking of the Thornfield Gala. He was not here as her patron, but as her peer. "The Singapore team sends their regards," he mentioned casually as they paused before a sculpture of woven, light-conducting fibers. "Your preliminary notes on integrating the Peranakan tile motifs into the lobby's digital installation were met with enthusiastic approval." "I'm glad to hear it. Livia's team has been wonderfully collaborative. They respect expertise," he said, his gaze lingering on her. "As do I." The intensity in his look was no longer purely professional. It held a new warmth, a curiosity that went beyond her curatorial skills. The air around them seemed to tighten and hum. With a different frequency, he gestured toward a quieter alcove away from the main crowd, a space partially shielded by a hanging tapestry of living moss. "May I steal you for a moment? There's a point I'd like to discuss regarding the Japanese market application." It was a pretext, and they both knew it. She nodded, following him into the semi-private space. The sounds of the opening muted, replaced by the soft, earthy scent of the moss wall. He didn't speak immediately, simply looked at her, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed, yet intensely focused. "The contract," he began, his voice even softer now. "It's proceeding well." "Exceptionally well," she replied, meeting his gaze without hesitation. Your team has been a dream to work with. Good. A silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything unsaid, every glance from the garden terrace, every charged moment in the ballroom, every professional email that had subtly deepened their connection. I find, he said, choosing his words with a care she found profoundly moving, that my interest in the project's success is becoming increasingly personal. Alara's heart beat a steady, powerful rhythm against her ribs. This was not a man given to casual flirtation or empty compliments. Every word was measured, intentional, personal, she echoed, wanting to hear him say it. He took a small step closer, closing the distance between them. The space felt intimate, charged. I've admired your work for some time, Alara, he said. Using her first name for the first time, the sound of it a soft caress in the quiet alcove. But watching you reclaim your narrative with such courage and grace, that was something else entirely. He didn't touch her, didn't need to. The connection was a live wire between them. Julian, she said, and his name felt natural. On her lips that night, you offered me an arm. You didn't offer me a rescue. That meant everything. A slow, genuine smile softened the granite lines of his face, reaching his eyes. I don't deal in rescues, only in partnerships. He glanced back toward the vibrant gallery, then back at her, his expression open, questioning.
Where does your narrative go from here?
Alara looked at him, this powerful, enigmatic man, who saw her not as a +1 or a distraction, but as an equal. She thought of the gilded betrayal that now felt a lifetime away, a mere prologue to this moment. She smiled, a true, unfiltered smile that lit her from within. I believe, she said, her voice a confident whisper, it's just beginning.